This is very dirty politics. It's unprecedented in Sacramento. Democrats that are on the assembly have told me this is immoral, it's totally undemocratic, and it's being driven by the governor and leaders in the assembly. It's outrageous.
Hello everyone, Steve Hilton here with a special edition of the Steve Hilton Show. I want to call it an emergency edition because we do have an emergency happening right now in California, which is this absolutely outrageous attempt by Democrats in Sacramento to sabotage, to kill an initiative that has been widely supported across our state by Republicans and Democrats and independents. It's a ballot initiative for November that will reform Proposition 47, which, as many of you know, I'm sure pretty much all of you know now, is one of the main drivers of the terrible crime and chaos we see on our streets. Proposition 47, amongst other things, enshrines in law the mad idea that you can steal up to $950 worth of stuff every single day, and it's still only going to be a misdemeanor and you're basically let off with no punishment. That is driving so much of what we see on our streets. There's been this process over the last few months to put together a ballot initiative to reform that, to bring sanity, common sense back to that specific piece of legislation, to reform Proposition 47, widely supported by Democrats, Republicans, hundreds of thousands of signatures. Way more signatures were gathered than is necessary to get it on the ballot this November. And guess what is now happening right before our eyes? Literally, the clock is ticking. Democrats in Sacramento are trying to kill this measure. So we have a very special guest today who knows all about this, who's been right at the heart of this fight and has been incredibly clear about what's going on, why it's outrageous, and what you need to do right now to try and stop this absolutely appalling attempt to sabotage this initiative by the Democrats. And he joins us right now. He's the district attorney of Yolo County, Jeff Reisig. I think even you said, like, it's you can't believe it, but they really are doing this. So I wanted to bring you into our show today to explain what's going on, give us the whole background. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Steve. I appreciate it. Yeah, and this is shocking. So let me just give you a little background. So I have been part of a coalition of thousands of people around California that have been working to get an initiative on the ballot in November of 2024. It's called the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act. And what this will do is it'll amend some of the laws that specifically deal with the retail theft crisis, the drug crisis, the homelessness crisis that was really caused by Proposition 47, which was passed by voters in 2014. I know you've talked about it a lot. You know it very well. So this initiative was overwhelmingly popular in the field when we were out gathering signatures. We collected 900,000 signatures across the state, bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, independents. People were lining up to sign it. And the coalition behind it is massive. We've got Democrat mayors, the San Francisco mayor, believe it or not, the San Jose mayor, Santa Monica, and then up and down the Central Valley with Republicans and independents and everyone and their mother, basically, retailers, grocers, business owners, mom and pop shops. Everybody wants to get this on the ballot so we have a chance to save California and turn around some of these crime issues that are just ravaging our state. So here's the update. Last week, we received a message from the Assembly Speaker's office. The Assembly Speaker is Robert Rivas, and his chief of staff contacted our coalition leaders and said, well, guys, we want to tell you, we have some legislative bills that are going to be voted on soon, and we're going to insert some language in our bills, which is referred to as a poison pill. And what the language basically says is, if these legislative bills are ultimately passed by the legislature, they'll have this provision in it that says their laws will be immediately repealed if the initiative that I just described a minute ago passes in November. Why would they do that? Why would they try and kill their own legislation, which they keep bragging about how great it is? They keep going around the state beating their chest saying, this is great, we're going to solve all the problems. It's not going to solve the problems. It's a fairly weak package. The reason they're doing it is two things. First, it's creating a really confusing situation for voters and people that support the initiative because they're being presented with this choice. Do I support this legislation or go all the way to November and take the chance of losing the legislation if I vote for the initiative? And so they're creating a really inconsistent choice for voters instead of just saying, hey, well, let democracy play out. Maybe the legislative package does a few things and then the initiative actually takes it all the way to the end. That's the way it should be. But here's the real reason they're doing it. This is inside baseball. This is why the supermajority is pushing this through. If they're successful in getting this poison pill provision into the legislation, and they've got basically 14 bills that they are pushing through trying to get this in, it will immediately trigger an amended title and summary by the Attorney General of California. And what I mean by that is before this actually gets placed on the ballot in November, the Attorney General has one more chance to look at the initiative, look at existing law, and decide, what am I going to call this? And he has total discretion to decide what the title will be. We believe they're doing this so that when he issues the title and summary for November, it will be something like, this initiative will repeal urgency legislation dealing with organized retail crime. That is a totally fraudulent title. It's going to confuse voters, and it could, seriously sabotage the effort that we've been engaged in. So this is very dirty politics. It's unprecedented in Sacramento. That's not my opinion. That's opinion from people that have spent their whole lives over there. I've heard Democrats have said, Democrats that are on the assembly have told me this is immoral. It's dirty. It shouldn't be happening. It's totally undemocratic. And it's being driven by the leadership, by the governor and leaders in the assembly. It's outrageous what's happening.
It is outrageous. Let me just underline that. This is an attempt to kill a proposition that has been through exactly the process mandated in the Constitution, more than cleared the necessary level of signatures to get on the ballot, way over. I mean, your target was like 550,000 or something like that, and you need a bit of extra because some of the signatures are thrown out because they're not valid. Way over that, 900,000 plus. And this is an effort to kill that. And this is coming from the exact same people who endlessly lecture us about our democracy and how their political opponents are a threat to democracy and so on. And here they are trying to stop the voters having a say on something because they don't like it. So the process part of this is outrageous. One further quick point on the process part, because I want to get to the substance of all of this in a second. But this point about the Attorney General writing the title and summary, that is a general point we've discussed many times on this show, which is it's outrageous that the Attorney General, a partisan politician, gets to write this stuff anyway at all, and because it's used to sway the voters who don't have all the time in the world to kind of analyze these often very complicated ballot initiatives. And in fact, that's exactly how Prop 47 passed in the first place, with a totally distorted and deceitful title and summary. Was it Attorney General? It was Kamala Harris, AG, at that time. I think
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay. So, they're good at this. This is what they do. The general principle of a partisan politician. Okay, they're called Attorney General as a partisan, politician usually who's in that position, writing these things outrageous. And especially when there's a clearly sensible alternative available, which is the legislative analyst's office in Sacramento, that everyone agrees is actually really pretty independent. For example, they've recently been very publicly challenging the governor on his budget projections and so on. So that's an easy fix if they wanted to do it, but of course they don't want to do it because it takes away some power. So let's get into the specifics of the substance. The first time we talked about this on this show, my guest was your colleague Lisa Smitkamp, DA in Fresno County, also part of your coalition.
Great
and,
DA.
Yeah, and she and we talked about the initiative then. This was back a few months ago, and what's in your initiative. And then at the end of the interview, I think the Democrats had just published their alternative fix to Prop 47, as it were, in a set of legislative packages. I think then it was 6 bills. I think, if I'm remembering it correctly. And I said to Lisa, what do you think of all this? And she just like, oh, it's ridiculous. Newsom doesn't know what he's talking about. Totally dismissed it. What's happened? What is in their bills? Am I right? Why is it now 14 bills? Um, what are they? Just take at face value what they are saying about their legislation.
Right. Well, there's now 14 bills, and it's both Assembly bills and Senate bills. And they, just to be clear, they're really narrow in their focus. If I'll just remind people, the initiative, the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, Theft Reduction Act, it's focused on both the homelessness piece, the addiction piece, retail theft, the smash and grabs, and then hard drugs like fentanyl. Their legislation is pretty narrow and it's focused mostly on organized retail theft and like honestly, it's nibbling around the edges of the crisis. And here's our assessment: there are some bills that they've proposed that we don't oppose. They're not bad, but they're just kind of they're not going to do much. They're not going to help solve the problem in any significant way, but they're not bad. Some of the other bills are total just there's nothing there. I mean, it's literally just rhetoric and it doesn't do anything to change the existing law. And then there's two or three bills that they're touting that actually make things worse. And so in summation, their package is on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being great, it's like a two, a one or a two. It's pretty dismal, pretty miserable. That doesn't stop them from running around the state saying they've got this great package and they're going to solve all of the problems that are out there. But the reality is, their package, if it was passed, is not going to result in any significant changes in the crisis that we're seeing. It's not going to stop the smash and grabs, which are being driven by these recidivists, people that steal again and again and again and again because of Prop 47, because the legislative package does nothing to target the recidivist. And that is the nucleus of the problem on the retail theft crisis in California. And what I mean by that is, I'll just remind people, prior to Prop 47, if you were a recidivist, meaning if you stole multiple times, you could be charged with a felony after your second offense, regardless of the amount. Well, Prop 47 eliminated that and said, no, you can steal up to $950 every day, 10 times a day, every day of the week, every day of the year, and it's going to be a misdemeanor. It's going to be a ticket. And that's why we've been in this crazy crisis where California leads the nation in losses. And so our initiative, the People's Initiative, actually brings back petty theft with a prior on the third offense. And we know that that is critical to solving the crisis. Here is the critical point that I want to emphasize. In order to amend Prop 47, which is what we're doing, Prop 47 said when it was passed, the only way to change this law to make the penalties tougher is to go back to the ballot. That's in the initiative. The legislature cannot do that on its own. It can't change the laws in the legislature. It would have to put something on the ballot. So you ask yourself, why wouldn't the California legislature at least consider some minor amendments to Prop 47 given this crisis we're in? Well, here's why. Here's the inside baseball. We have heard directly from high-level people in the administration and leadership that they do not want this juicy crime issue on the November 24 ballot because political experts will tell you that a juicy crime issue like this is going to drive higher turnout in all of California, but most importantly, in key swing districts that will be on the ballot in November for congressional seat. As many people know, the House of Representatives is closely divided, and in 2022, the control of the Assembly, or of the House of Representatives was driven by California. So this is the bullseye, and this is what most of the public doesn't really understand about why are the Democrats doing this. They do not want this on the ballot in November because it could sway those seats. And there's about 5 or 6 competitive districts in California. In addition, there's key races. The LA DA race could be affected by this. There's a key recall in Oakland. There's lots of other races that they have told us, basically, whistleblowers, have told us this is what's really going on, because we have said early on, hey, Governor, hey, Assembly, Senate, if you'd like to sit down and talk about negotiating a package that does go back to the ballot with more modest reforms, we're open to that. No, crickets. They don't want to do it because they don't want to go back to the ballot. And that's where the governor's head is. He's, as you know, he's focused on the White House. And this is what I've been told. This is a directive all the way
Yeah.
from Washington, D.C. Don't do this. Don't get this on the ballot.
Okay. You've answered the main question. That's incredibly clear and helpful. which is why on earth would they pick this hill to die on, to water down a reform package aimed at dealing with what is evidently one of the most, one of those obvious problems facing California and our businesses and our communities that create this sense of disorder and chaos and are destroying the reputation of California. So why on earth would they be against this? And you've answered the question, because as always with them, it's pure politics. It is power. And exactly as you say, because ballot initiatives are often a way, and both sides use it this way, let's be honest about that, to sort of get a motivating issue on the ballot so that you increase turnout because your supporters really care about that issue. They use it exactly this way. They use abortion in this way, on the left, and in some states they're doing it this year, and so they don't want that makes total sense. So what their desired outcome here is this, right? That they actually want your coalition, to withdraw. They can't take it off the ballot, can they?
No, they can't.
They can, but they're using this as a threat to try and persuade you to take it off. Is that the kind of actual game they're playing here?
It is. It's a very sinister scare tactic where through this trickery, this gamesmanship, they're hoping that the proponents will back down somehow and say, "Oh, okay, Uncle, you got us. We'll take your package and pack up our toys and go home." That's not going to happen. And this is the reality: is the coalition is so huge. From mom and pop shops to people that own every business owner that I've talked to says this is what we need to redirect California. This isn't a partisan issue, by the way. This isn't a Republican issue. This is a Democrat, Republican, Independent. We're all on
Yes,
board
I
on
mean, as I
this.
said, let's just re-emphasize. You have got, and that's when I thought this initiative is guaranteed, as it were, to qualify and pass. When you saw mayors of our great cities, San Jose, Matt Mahan in San Jose, who I know, London Breed in San Francisco, the mayor of San Diego, I believe, also a Democrat, signed on. Is
But
that right, Gloria?
he's certainly supported what we're trying to do. I don't
Right.
think he's taken an official public position on it, but
Okay. So you got some big Democrats, not just some random person,
the
sort of
biggest
supporting
progressive
this.
Democrats in the country are supporting it. I mean, San
Exactly.
Francisco, does it get any more
Exactly.
progressive?
The thing that's just amazing is that despite all of that, they they really want you to take it off because they don't want because they what they really care about is power in Washington and the Congress. Is exactly right. You've got these districts that they're targeting. They're throwing tons of money into it. California could make the difference between losing and holding the House for them. In terms of your coalition, just so that we're clear about it, are you saying with certainty that you're not going to withdraw? What is the actual decision-making process and leadership of your coalition? Is that has already been decided? Have you announced your position and so on?
Right. So the coalition is made up again. There's 2,500 strong and growing every day of people that are businesses that are behind this. Remember, 900,000 signed the petition to get it on the ballot. As of today, what I can tell you is this sinister last ditch effort to put this poison pill into their bills has really soured the leadership of the initiative, the proponents, and the coalition. Because how do you trust the legislature and the governor when they act in bad faith like this? We had always been open to negotiations, honest, good faith negotiations. But now the question is, how can you trust them given this really despicable, sleazy move that they've engaged in with the poison pill? And on top of that, I just want to point out when they were asked, the leadership, they actually had a press event yesterday. I would urge you to watch it. It's a clown show. And what happened is they asked the leadership, reporters in the audience said, "You just said you're going to insert this inoperability clause. They don't like poison pill. And can you explain why?" And the leaders said, "Well, we're concerned that if the initiative passes, there might be some conflicts, some legal conflicts with our legislation." That's their purported basis for the poison pill. Period. That's it. We're afraid that there might be conflicts. And the reporters went wild. What conflicts? Tell us what conflicts. They couldn't. They couldn't. There is no conflict because here's the reality. Under California law, if an initiative passes that has consequences that are more significant than legislation, it controls. It's just a matter of constitutional law. It's not a situation where there's a legal conflict that would somehow make something defective. So their purported reason is constitutionally wrong. And then the other part of it is if you just look at what they're proposing in their package, I just told you a minute ago, like some of the bills were like, yeah, that's a good bill. It's not great. It's a 2 out of 10, but it's not terrible. If we're going to 100%, their legislation goes to 10%. The initiative goes to 100%. It's a continuum. There is nothing inconsistent. It's all consistently moving the ball down the field. So it's a lie. Let's just be clear. It's a false basis for the poison pill. And I guess I'm a little bit encouraged, and I'm glad we're talking today because, the media, even the mainstream media, has gone. They're all over it. They're not
Yes.
buying it. They're calling them out, and it stinks.
I agree with that. I think it's a really interesting sign that you're seeing a kind of pushback finally against the arrogance of one party rule that we're seeing in Sacramento. I mean, this is the latest manifestation of it, but it's so egregious. It's so transparently partisan and cynical and playing around with people's lives and businesses' livelihoods. I mean, it's so despicable. I think it's a defining moment actually. Not just on the substance of this issue, which is so important, but on the way they behave and the arrogance of their approach to rule, which is like we have this divine right to rule and we can do whatever we want and we don't care about anyone else. We have a supermajority and screw you. And again, as I emphasized at the beginning, this from the people who lecture us constantly about democracy and the rule of law and democratic norms and all of this. It's just unbelievable. A couple of things I just want to add to your point about the arguments. I mean, you exactly as you say, you can tell how weak they are because of the things they say. So Gavin Newsom, I saw at the weekend, was asked about it. And his basic point was, well, this is like the right way. We should deal with this legislatively, not through the initiative process. That just like obviously makes no sense because first of all, the initial proposition, which is at fault here, that's caused all these problems. Not the only cause of our crime problems, of course. Prop 47, you've got Prop 57, AB 109. There's a whole set of things, plus the pro-crime DAs in places like Oakland and LA, whatever. So there's a lot wrong with our criminal, our setup when it comes to crime in California beyond Prop 47. But just take Prop 47, that was passed in an initiative, not legislatively. And who massively supported it at the time? Gavin Newsom. He was right behind Prop 47. So suddenly it's not okay to do it through an initiative. And exactly as you point out, which at this point I hadn't I'd heard before, but I'd forgotten, which was, in any case, the language of Prop 47 requires it to be an initiative that deals with it. So that's a ridiculous argument for him to say it has to be done legislatively. It's just nonsense. And then the other thing I want you to address, which is, and I didn't see all of that. I was doing a radio interview actually, so I heard a little bit live of the press conference. I didn't hear all of it. The Senate leader for the Democrats put out a statement which I just thought was shameful in the last few days, where he attacked the Republicans in the legislature, James Gallagher, Brian Jones, have been up in arms about this and so on. And the Democrat Senate leader put out a statement accusing them of racism. Said, well, they just want to go back to the dark days of locking up black people and so on. I mean, it just was so cynical and disgusting that he used that argument.
Yeah, I agree. And that's straight out of their playbook. They will continue to say that this is going to return us to an era of a decade ago with mass incarceration of people of color. And that's all the proponents and people who support this are trying to do. It's a flat out false statement to say that. I mean, number one, let's talk about the increase in victimization. The biggest increase in victimization in California has been people of color. It's places like Oakland that are being decimated, and LA and San Francisco and San Diego. It's people of color that are actually suffering the most consequences from these failed policies, and Prop 47 being one of the worst. So they don't want to talk about that. And then the reality, if you look at this initiative, the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act, look, the reason why it has such strong bipartisan support from Democrats and independents and Republicans is it's very balanced. It's not just to lock them up and throw away the key deal. I wouldn't support that. I've been a DA for 18 years. I'm in a deep blue county. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. But I wouldn't support something that was just going to send people to prison to lock it up. No, this is very carefully drafted to have accountability for these recidivists and the people that need help. but also mandated treatment and diversion. And that's the key. That's why so many people are supporting this from the left. The attacks on it, it's just the old playbook. And yeah, that's what we're going to hear again and again. And you know what? I resist it every time. I just throw it right back in their face. Like, why do you want people of color to be victimized at such
Yeah.
astounding rates from these broken policies? We're not going to stack the prisons with people. We're going to get them into treatment. Are you against mandated treatment? Well, actually,
Yes,
they
because
are against
a
mandated
big
treatment.
driver of the theft is to buy drugs, right? That's a huge driver.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share this with you. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this subject is it's just really quick. But I've been a DA for 18 years in California. There's only 58 counties. I was elected in '07. 2014, one of my family members became homeless. He became addicted to heroin. And since 2014, he lives on the streets in Sacramento. He uses heroin and methamphetamine every day because of Prop 47. It's a misdemeanor. And he steals every day to support his habit. As I'm the district attorney and I see him when I get off the freeway begging for money, and I've talked to him and he tells me he just goes and steals when he can't raise the $80 he needs to buy his drugs. My own family is a victim of the failed policies of 47, and it's personal for me. And so, I'm not interested in having my family member locked up for life in prison, but we love him. We want him to get into treatment, and to do that we need accountability, so they just can't stand on the corner and shoot up heroin and sleep on the street and steal. And so that's why, this is a very compassionate actual approach that we've drafted with this initiative. And that's why we have so many people who are recovered that have signed on with us. We have people like Tom Wolfe out of San Francisco, recovered, loves this initiative. We have Hope Street Coalition out of Los Angeles. They support it. I mean, the list of people that are behind this who have come from homelessness and addiction is overwhelming. That should tell you something.
Thank you for that story. That brings it home so powerfully. So let's just follow that through. So with your initiative, what would happen that if your someone in the situation of your family member would be caught stealing, then with your initiative now, is it the third time, or after a couple of misdemeanors it's a felony and then they can be required to undergo treatment? Is that the process?
That's right. So this is the way it works. So just remind everybody, currently in California, because of Prop 47, the possession of hard drugs like fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, PCP, it's a misdemeanor offense. It's a ticket. And so that's why you have all these people who are out on the streets, like my own family member, who are using drugs, and there's no consequence. Even if they get a ticket, they throw it away. They don't go to court, and it's a misdemeanor if they don't show up. The jails are full of felons. There's no room even if they are caught and convicted. And so it's just this, revolving door of addiction on the streets. The initiative would do this. The first offense, possession of hard drugs, if the initiative passes, it's still a misdemeanor. The second offense, it's still a misdemeanor, no change, right? But on the third offense, they would then be subjected to a mandated treatment felony. This is a new creation in the law that the initiative will bring. And what that means is exactly what it sounds like. They'll be arrested. They'll be taken off the streets. They'll be taken to a jail. They'll be seen by treatment providers. They'll be assessed to see what their level of addiction and mental illness might be. And then they're going to see a judge, and the judge is going to say, sir, you have a choice. We have a treatment protocol right here that the experts have designed for you. If you take it and you complete it under supervision from the court and these nice treatment folks, your entire conviction will be expunged. Now, that might take them 9 months, 18 months. Some of it's going to be residential treatment. Some of it's going to be outpatient, but they're going to be supervised, et cetera. If the individual says, yeah, no, I don't want any of your treatment, then they're looking up to 3 years in jail. It's a carrot and a stick approach. Currently, there's no stick, right? I just told you, currently, you can use drugs all day and steal all day, and there's no stick. So the initiative on the third offense would bring the stick back. Now, our goal isn't to send people to prison or jail. Again, I'm talking about my own family too. We want them to get treatment. But what we know from the past experience in California, when we had drug courts before Prop 47, is they work. When people have an incentive to choose treatment, they choose it and it works. And so here's the bottom line. Day one, this initiative goes into effect, we will start seeing changes in the homeless population. It'll reduce dramatically. It's the same approach with the theft. On the third offense, it'll now be a felony, which means they face real consequences. Doesn't mean everybody's going to go to prison or jail. It means that a judge is going to have this, we're going to be able to turn the screws on people and say, look, we might have a program over here for you, whatever your issue is, but you're not going to be allowed to continue to steal and commit crimes in California. There's consequences, and that's what we're lacking right now.
Let's just take the best part of their 14 bill package, like that we would say is the most sensible thing, that you said like a 10% or 20% of what you'd want. What's the best thing? What's their best response to a situation like your family members and others in that situation in their package?
Well, okay, let's be clear. Their package really has nothing at all on the mandated treatment for
Right,
seriously
right.
addicted people. They don't touch fentanyl at all, which our initiative is focused on fentanyl dealers with guns. They don't have any of that. Their package has a couple of soft bills to increase the treatment options out there, which is that's fine. Like we all want more treatment options, but when people aren't even choosing treatment and people aren't getting off the street because of these programs, then the question is why this is not going to help. I mean, look, homelessness has gone up to 180,000 in California in the last few years, despite the fact that the state spent $25 billion. What they're doing isn't working. So, the difference or their package, I would say, if you look at it, all 14 bills, here's the bottom line. 50% of the bills are absolutely meaningless. They don't do anything to change existing law. As crazy as that sounds, like when you look at it, you're like, this does nothing. It's rhetoric. Okay. So that's like, we just say these are worthless. 25% of the bills actually make the situation worse because they require us to prove additional elements as prosecutors before we can convict people of certain theft crimes. Again, as crazy as that sounds,
What?
they're trying, yeah, I can explain more in a minute, but there are 25% of the bills which do things that are okay. And again, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being a great bill, these are like bills that are 2 or 3. One of the bills is by an assembly member out of the LA area, Jackie Irwin Ventura. And it's a good bill. It says that if somebody steals from one county and then steals again from another county, the district attorney in either county can talk to the other DA and say, hey, I'd like to bring that over into my county if it's an organized retail crime. Because currently we can't do that. I can't, in my county up near Sacramento, I'm in Yolo, I can't prosecute crime that happened in Sacramento and then they come across the river to my county. I can't prosecute them together. This bill would allow that. So that's a good bill, and that's not in our initiative, but that's a real minor thing. It's not going to solve the crisis under any scenario. And then the last thing is, they've been really focused. Their package is focused on this idea of organized retail crime and organized retail networks. And the governor talks about it a lot. And this legislation codifies their organized retail crime bills that have already been in existence since 2018. And this just makes them permanent. And they think that this is a huge thing, that now we're making them permanent and these are going to be great. Here's the reality. I just told you I'm one of California's 58 DAs, one of the longest serving. We did a study of all of the DAs last year about, hey, how are these organized retail crime bills that have been on the books, how are they working for people? 68% of all the DAs said we haven't filed a single one because they're totally broken. And just my experience, these laws they're too complex. They require too many elements. There's other laws on the books that are easier for us to prove. And so this law that they're touting, the organized retail theft statute, is really a big dud.
So there's nothing even new. So then,
No,
so the good bit, as it were, the good part of their 14 bill package isn't even new,
that's right. It's old news.
apart from the multiple county thing.
Yeah, I mean that's really the only thing that I can point to that I would say is good. I mean, they actually, one of the serious flaws with their package that we haven't talked about is they do purport in their package to address the issue of aggregation. And what that means is currently under California law, our hands are tied. When somebody steals, let's say they steal $400 this morning from Target, and then they go over to Walmart tonight and they steal 600. So now you have $1,000. That's a felony level theft if you could aggregate those two together. But the law doesn't currently allow us to do that in California. It's a very narrow exception where you can do it, and I won't get into the details of it. So they know it, the retailers know it. And so what the legislation purports to do is to improve that. Here's their problem. In order to effectively fix the aggregation issue, it has to go back to the ballot. They know it has to go back to the ballot, but they're not doing it. And this is unbelievable. The legislature has evidence that it has to go back to the ballot because 2 years ago, another lawmaker tried to do this. His name was Assemblymember Marisucci out of the LA area. His bill would have allowed aggregation, and the Judicial Council, the lawyers for the legislature, wrote up an opinion and said, you can't do this without going back to the ballot. The bill died in committee, right? So fast forward now, here we are, and this same legislature is now saying, no, no, we can do it. We can do it. And so they have a legislative bill that purports to focus on aggregation. There's all kinds of other problems with the bill, but the biggest problem with that bill is they're being deceptive in telling people that and here's the other part. When this was being vetted between parties, stakeholders, the public defenders were in the room and they said, we're going to object to that the moment it's passed. The DA said, that's totally unconstitutional. So you've got both parties in a criminal case saying, hey, legislature, this is illegal. You can't do it. They're doing it anyway. It's a total constitutional failure.
Can you just tell us, specifically the things that are in their package that would make things worse?
Yeah, so they're purporting to create a couple of new laws about organized possession of stolen property. And the short version is, in California, we already have existing felony laws on the books that allow us to go after individuals who possess stolen property. If it's over $950, I can charge a felony, right? It's pretty rare where we actually catch people with stolen property over $950. It just is. But they're purporting to add a new law that they're touting, as going after, the organized thieves who possess this stolen property. But when you look at the elements, they're requiring multiple individuals involved, multiple instances of theft that contribute to the stolen property. There's multiple elements that aren't currently required in existing law. So as a prosecutor, I look at this and I'm like, why would I ever use this law that requires me to do two additional things when I can use this felony law that's been on the books for 60 years? So it actually makes it worse. I'm still going to use the old law. There's no reason to have that law. And it sends the false message to voters that they're offering a solution. And really all they're doing is putting up another roadblock for sheriffs, police chiefs, and DAs. So that's the kind of thing that you're just like, they're not serious. This is not a serious package.
And then the interesting thing about it is that this emphasis that they're putting on the organized crime aspect is another form of deflection, because they're trying to say, well, that's the whole problem. It's these gangs. We're going to do something about these organized retail theft gangs and so on, because they want to avoid people focusing on the terrible human consequences of their policies on addiction and homelessness and housing first, for example, which means that, we haven't got time to get into all that, which means that actually state money spent on anything to do with homelessness cannot require sobriety and treatment and so on. So, it's just the whole thing is such a mess of their own making. And they want people to think it's nothing to do with any of that. It's just we got a problem with retail gangs and that's all we need to deal with.
That's exactly right. The focus on organized retail crime, that's what they always talk about. It's totally off the mark. Look, I've been working with retailers directly, the big box stores, the mom and pop shops. The biggest driver of the theft crisis is not these organized gangs. It's actually people, just opportunists that walk into stores and they're just like, meh, there's no consequence. So they just grab some product and they walk out. We have shop owners in our county who say 6 out of 10 people that come into their store steal.
It's an amazing number.
It's crazy, but this is real. They come in and they're grabbing an item here and an item and they walk out. It's a misdemeanor. The police can't respond because they're stacked.
And because Prop 47 and the $950 number has just become so famous. Everyone knows.
It is famous and crooks know it. We have crooks that carry calculators, no joke. And others will say if they are actually contacted by the police, they'll laugh. Like, I know I'm just getting a ticket. I didn't steal over $950. And so from meeting, look, our coalition includes thousands at this point of shop owners, convenience stores, mom and pop shops, and the big retailers. The crisis is not being driven by organized retail gangs. That is a fiction. And it's a fiction that the leadership and the administration, to your point, they hang their hat on it because it's some mystical, crime group that they're going to take down. That's not what's happening. There are those groups, but that's not what's driving the crisis. What's driving the crisis are the day-to-day thefts, and that's what the initiative targets, is the recidivist.
It's a direct a comparison with how they talk about inflation these days at the national level, instead of, because they want to deflect from the consequence of their own overspending and the policies that people warned at the time, including Democrats like Larry Summers. They say, oh, it's price gouging, right? The problem is price gouging by corporate America. It's just so ridiculous. Same here in California with the gas prices. And so it's nothing to do with the fact that we've got these ridiculous regulations and taxes. It's because big oil is doing price gouging. I mean, it's just so insulting to the intelligence. I could sort of talk for longer about it, and I do want to wrap it up. But one last thing, because it's just come up in the recent conversation about all this, because the retail part of it is such a focus here, is the automated checkout and the self checkout stuff from stores, and the connection between that. And you've got this store. And do you remember the Gavin Newsom thing about where he was complaining that a Target worker didn't stop someone stealing? Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, look, a lot of the stores are shutting down their self-checkouts because the theft is so rampant in California. And that's a terrible thing. It inconveniences a lot of us who appreciate being able to just go through self-checkout. But when you look at the losses that these retailers are suffering, again, from opportunists, it's not organized groups, it's just people that just walk out the door with product because they can. It's understandable why they would shut it down. And it's just another inconvenience that we all pay the price on. And that's what I say is, when folks talk about, oh, well, criminal justice reform, we really need to, be cautious about, holding too many people accountable. It's like, well, how about the rest of us who have to live in this filth with people sleeping on the streets and shooting up drugs in public and stealing from our stores and locking up product? At some point, this is across the board, Democrats, independents, Republicans, like, we've had enough. Like, come on, let's get
Exactly.
back to a point in the middle. That's really, I mean, this
Well, that's what's
initiative
so good
is in the
about what
middle.
it's in the middle. And to be honest, I've spoken to conservatives and who are a little bit disappointed, and they say, "Well, I'd like to go much further and get rid of Prop 47 completely, and get rid of the $950 number, and just delete that completely, and be tougher." And the fact that you've got this balanced proposal that has commanded cross-party support, and yet even with that, they just, for purely partisan political reasons, not even connected to what's going on in California, but as you've explained so clearly, driven by their national political calculations, that they're prepared to cause harm to Californians, continue to cause harm to Californians, is truly despicable.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I'm born and raised in California. I just can't imagine ever leaving, but the way the state has been going with this is really, it's not sustainable. And that's why I feel like this is the time. People are awake. We've got
Yeah,
900,000 signatures. We've got
I
an
agree.
election in November. We just got to get this thing to the ballot. And I have faith in Californians that they're waking up.
I do too, and you're part of that, and so am I, and that's what we're here to do, to fight to save our beautiful state. Last question, Jeff: where can people follow you? You've been putting out really good information on this, and get involved in any way. What should people do if they're listening to this and want to help?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, personally, I'm on X at Jeff Reisig, and that's my most prolific site.
And that's
I'm also on
Reisig.
right, JEFFREISIG. Please, follow me. I'm talking about all these issues as much as I can when I'm doing my daily job. On top of that, I'm also on LinkedIn. But here's my ask for all of your listeners. Look, right now we need everybody to pick up the phone, call your assembly members, your state assembly, and your state senators. Maybe even call your mayors and your council members, and just say, listen, I support amending Prop 47, this initiative. I support it, and I do not support this gamesmanship in the Capitol. The key terms here in the next, and this has to happen like this week or within the next few weeks. You call your lawmakers and say, I oppose any of your crime bills that has this poison pill language. Do not vote for that. Do not support crime bills with poison pill language. This is critical right now because we only have a few weeks before they do a final vote, maybe shorter than that. They literally could be
Yeah.
voting on this by Thursday because they're trying to get
Okay.
ahead of the bad press. But that's the ask. And, thousands of people are making those calls, but we need everyone across the state to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeff, for fighting so hard, for explaining it all so clearly. We'll get this out as quickly as possible and share it and get the word out and do what we can. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Steve.